600,000 Americans drop dead, go up in smoke. No longer are on the face of this earth. Corpses are there. The life essence of the individuals, not so much. This is not normal. 33 million people have been infected with the virus. All of those people are going to have medical bills. Many of those people are going to have physical effects that are going to go downstream. This doesn't even touch the number of businesses that went belly up, the number of people who were going hungry, the number of people who wasn't able to pay their rent, or for that matter, wasn't able to pay their electric bills, and still is going to get hit with those bills as landlords try to extricate the funds from those individuals who didn't have the funds back then and probably, certainly, are not going to have them now, even when they start back working. This was not something that was magic. This wasn't an accident. These things were policy choices that created this environment that we are trying to pull ourselves out of. So for a president to get in office, for a president to make all of these promises, for a president to make all of these promises in the context of all of this, and don't have the urgency, the skill, the dexterity, the physical presence to affect that agenda. Joe Manchin in the Senate has been one of the key proponents to basically kneecap Joe Biden at every turn. Joe Biden says, I want to get $15 an hour pass. I don't necessarily think Joe Biden believed it, but Joe Biden said it. He had a house to give it to him. Joe Manchin said, I'm not for that. I don't believe the American worker is worth $15 an hour. So yes, I'm a no vote. Walks away. Hey, what about HR 1, to protect voting? I mean, Republicans, 90% of the voting bills that are coming out are like basically Republicans restricting voting in various states because they lost the election. And instead of, doing the hard work of trying to figure out policy positions that the public appreciates, and the same thing is true for Democrats, by the way, they decided to use politics. So they decided, let's just make it difficult for people to vote who would vote against us. And let's just see if that helps us stay in office. Let's see if we can gerrymander the districts of a particular thing. Not to mention the money in politics. You're talking about billions of dollars. And Joe Manchin is like, yeah, no. This is something that is radically attacking his own political party and has been doing so for the last, 10 years or more, if not longer. And he is like, yeah, no, that's okay. I'm perfectly fine with Republicans restricting the capability of other Democrats, people who are part of my party, getting elected. That's an astonishing position to take. Astonishing position. Joe Biden is believing that he's going to get some kind of bipartisanship deal accomplished when he can't even make agreements with his own members of his own party. He is negotiating himself down with members of his own party. When the budget reconciliation bill passed, there were 0 Republicans on that bill. 0. Democrats ran the table. They could have did whatever they want that could have fit within the context of reconciliation. And if the parliamentarian bitched and moaned about it, they could have given her the door. They had the capability to do those things. The $15 an hour minimum wage is the canary in the coal mine. At least it should be viewed as such. You had budget reconciliation. You had the ability to give the American public, the American worker, $15 an hour. And you're not really giving him anything. He's earning it. But you're basically logically following through on saying that anybody that is not making $15 an hour is on a starvation wage. And there were 40 million people, give or take, that were not making $15 an hour. So understand what we're saying for the moment. You had 42% of the public that was working making $18,000 a year or less before COVID hit. $18,000 is a starvation wage and the most starvation of wages. And 42%, nearly half of the American public, was making starvation wage. That's astonishing. That's astonishing. And we relied on those people during the COVID crisis to deliver our food, to continue to work at those factories, to put their health, their bodies on the line for us. They did that for us. Yes, they needed to get paid. Yes, they needed a wage and everything else. But all things being equal, we also had vital services that we needed to be delivered. And those people did the job. Weren't paid more. Did the job. So an ineffectual president comes in. Instead of that president dealing with the needs of the nation, Instead of that president saying all of these people died, well, I have carte blanche to do anything that I believe is in the best interest of America and this country, and I would rip down every barrier. I would castigate and destroy any political opposition, whether it's in my party or not, and to stand before the American public and say, this is what I am trying to accomplish. This is my vision for this country. This is my vision. This is what I want. This is my agenda. This is my contract with America. And you give me the people that I need to pass that agenda, and I will pass it. My name is Joe Biden. And they would believe you because when you had the opportunity to pass 15, you did it. When you got in office, you got rid of 50,000 in student debt. You kept your promise on the marijuana legislation. You pushed hard, advocating for the PRO Act and getting the members of your party on board, online, or at the very least, if necessary, utterly and outright politically destroying them. That's what a president does when a president believes it, when a president means it. To get $15 an hour that close, when and how do you plan on getting that passed? And if you can't get that passed, when you had the opportunity to get it passed, what does it mean for the other pieces of legislation that are going to have to basically go through the filibuster and the Republicans have no want, no need to do anything about? The clock is ticking on the filibuster, by the way, meaning in the context of when you can get rid of it. Right now, they can still get rid of the filibuster, but that is, I think September or something like that. Jamaal Bowman, gets on CNN, and Bowman is asked about Joe Manchin, and Bowman absolutely, completely, remorselessly shreds Joe Manchin. It gets to the point where the CNN guy is like, oh, is that entirely fair? Bowman, undeterred, plows further. This is a really great interview, and I wonder whether Bowman feels like an asshole. I wonder whether all of the progressives that are in the House of Representatives feel like an asshole. ALC was like, well, Biden can be pushed on the $15 an hour minimum wage. Well, no, Biden can't be pushed on the $15 an hour minimum wage. You had all of these ideas, all of these aspirations that could potentially get accomplished. And the lefties in Congress, in favor of team solidarity, as opposed to justice, lumped themselves in with the Democratic Party as they ditched and betrayed the American worker. Bowman is pissed. Bowman should be pissed. In part, he should be pissed at himself. Joe Manchin, day one, had no issue, no compunction with saying what he was not going to support, despite the fact that the overwhelming majority of the party support it, the overwhelming majority of the American public support it, and some of these policies are in Democrats' own best interest to maintain their capabilities of getting elected. Manchin, single person, was willing to buck his own party. The progressives that were in Congress that had the capability of doing the exact same thing refused to do so. Whether it was weakness, whether it was incompetence, whether it was this lost idea of trust in regards to Nancy Pelosi and Mama Bear, whatever it was, whether they did not think that they can deal with the pain of the COVID legislation basically floundering as a result of them pushing back against it. Well, Joe Manchin had no issue pushing back against it. What is your issue in pushing back against it, especially when the president said he wanted it? If the president said he wanted it, is the president going to come out and say, okay, I don't want the $15 an hour now, let's get the COVID bill passed? And if he's not going to do that, then you have every right, every reason to stand out there and scream, nothing is happening until we get 15 for the American worker. If Manchin had no issue doing that, why do you? If Manchin had no issue doing that with basically every piece of legislation, why don't you? Let's take a look at Bowman's clip. Because Bowman has a right to be angry. By the same token, Bowman, like I said, Bowman, in part, needs to be angry at himself.
Joe Manchin has become the new Mitch McConnell. Mitch McConnell, during Obama's presidency, said he would do everything in his power to stop Obama. He's also repeated that now during the Biden presidency by saying he would do everything in his power to stop President Biden. And now Joe Manchin is doing everything in his power to stop democracy and to stop our work for the people, the work that the people sent us here to do. H.R. 1 not only is a huge bill when it comes to voting rights, it's a huge bill in terms of getting big money out of politics, protecting our elections against fraud, and ending gerrymandering. I mean, big money in politics is what's destroying our democracy. And the Republican Party is aiding and abetting that. And Donald Trump is obviously doing that as well. So Manchin is not pushing us closer to bipartisanship. He is doing the work of the Republican Party by being an obstructionist, just like they've been since the beginning of Biden's presidency.
So is that really fair to compare?
So yes, Bowman has some feelings. Bo Manchin, he has no issue telling you what those feelings are. And by the way, Bowman just so happens to be right. Manchin is an obstructionist. Manchin has been basically gutting Joe Biden's policies. Manchin wants and loves that filibuster. He probably touches himself looking at and thinking about the filibuster. And the reason I say that is because if you get rid of the filibuster, you get rid of the excuse. The moment that you say, oh, it's not 60 votes, it's 51 votes, it's basically a parliament. Okay, you're in a new world on some level. The Democratic Party either has to put up or shut up. All those people who basically was using and leaning against the filibuster as the excuse would have to shut the hell up and do their goddamn jobs, or at the very least be seen as not doing their goddamn jobs. And you can't use the 60 vote threshold as being the reason, rationale, and excuse to not deliver for the American public. The Democratic Party, for all intents and purposes, especially many of the members in the Senate, love it not because it delivers them any kind of protection for the Republican Party. The Republican Party can get rid of the filibuster on day one that they take power. So it's not that. The issue is that the moment that you get rid of it, their excuse also goes away. What Bowman knows is that Manchin is not going to do anything for the filibuster for that reason. And from the standpoint of the policies and legislation, he just doesn't believe in that stuff. He's basically a Republican. Well, he's a Democrat. Many of the other Democrats are agree with this stuff. I guess the point that I'm making here is many of them on some level are willing to vote for this stuff. Manchin, not so much. Bowman, shredding the hell out of Manchin for that very specific reason. And what he's saying here, considering that that stuff could have been passed, had Manchin backed it, he's right. I have a hard time seeing how people can say he's wrong. The point of bipartisanship is not bipartisanship for the sake of bipartisanship. Your goal in that is to break your opposition, to be so dominant and so domineering in regards to the argument, the policies, the rhetoric, the politics, that your opposition cannot stand against you and your opposition basically foes and come to your position on some level. That's bipartisanship. Not, oh, we're just going to agree just so we have something. The secondary one is nonsense. The first one is just the way politics and relationships work. Let's keep going. Let's go to the other part.
Compare Joe Manchin to Manchin, the floor he's of the time Biden, and any other would be there's almost zero.
R1 has popularity across the country, in West Virginia and across the country.
And just so you know, he asked basically, hey, is it fair Manchin has voted with all the Biden bills? That's not true. You could say in a technical sense that a bill that came up and he voted for it, okay, fair enough. But that's different than bills that were killed that never actually came to the floor because Manchin basically was going to vote against it, so they didn't see the point in bringing it to the floor in the first place. Those are different things. There are plenty of things and ideas that Biden wanted that Manchin basically said, I don't want. And we're talking about a modest agenda at that. So technically, you could say it's true that he voted with Biden's agenda, but Biden only put out one bill. So yes, he voted with Biden's one bill. Great. That's the reporter, CNN reporter. Chuck Todd, basically.
Country, well over 65% of the American people support H.R. 1, and well over 50% of Republicans support H.R. 1. So the American people sent us to Washington to do a job. I mean, consider this. Just a few weeks ago, we had a bipartisan piece of legislation.
He's going to make another good point. Bowman is basically going to explain that how on earth do you have any reasonable expectation of bipartisanship when the one key singular piece of bipartisanship, agreement, and legislation, which was the Bipartisan Commission on the January 6th, they built that commission together. Republican Party had the ability to veto. The structure of this thing was built basically almost even Republicans and Democrats. And so they built a bipartisan commission, and then Republicans voted against the bipartisan commission that they built. So Bowman is making the point, if you can't even get something like that over the finish line, how do you expect to get anything else over the finish line? And if you can't expect to get anything over the finish line, why the hell would you waste your time in this kind of worthless pursuit? They sent you there to do a job. Do your job. That's basically the point that Bowman is making. And Bowman, yeah, is right. He's not being too harsh. Joe Biden is the thing. He's basically the Mitch McConnell in the Senate. The Democratic Party, even if it didn't get any Republican votes, has the capacity right now to get rid of the filibuster and enact an agenda. They can do that right now. Right now. They can have a change of perspective in the morning. Let's say they were hit in the head by a rock or something. It's like, you know what? We're going to just get rid of the filibuster and just do this. They just don't. This is not a Republican issue. That's what I'm trying to really nail down. People at the end of this administration are going to be like, oh, the Republicans. And I'm going to say, shut your mouth. Shut your mouth. It's not the Republicans. Joe Biden had the ability. He had the votes. Even at 51, he had the votes. He was negotiating with himself and negotiating himself down the entire administration. That wasn't a result of Republicans. That wasn't a result of Democrats. I get Bowman's frustration. And on some level, like I said, that frustration, if he was being honest, 3 a.m. between him and his God, some of this probably came from the idea that when they were in the House of Representatives, they were trying to be kumbaya. And all of the policy agendas and everything else that they wanted, those things got pushed to the wayside in favor of just being in coordination with the Democratic Party. And what they see is Joe Manchin saying fuck all, pretty much anything that he don't particularly like. They falling in line, Joe Manchin doing his own thing. They are probably on some level jealous of Manchin's independence and capability of basically saying, yeah, I don't want to do that. Especially when it's policies that Bowman and many of these other guys told their constituents that they were going to fight for, they were going to get passed. Also, one last thing, keep in mind, the document that I gave, or the report that I gave earlier, I think it was like 70 pages or something, the autopsy, got across this very specific point. The inability of Democrats to get anything accomplished, the ineffectiveness, the ineffectual look of them, the lack of an economic message, the lack of a sufficient branding where people actually know what the Democratic Party is or what the Democratic Party represents, in some respects, is greatly adversely affecting them to the tune of several seats in the House of Representatives, at least based on what the report is saying. I think they say 100 seats over the course of the United States. Bowman is right. Bowman has the right to be pissed. And Bowman has the right to get on CNN or whatever other platform or network and rip into Joe Manchin. By the same token, a part of that has to be reserved for himself. You should have came in like a bat out of hell. And you should have established yourself to get respect. And what I mean by that is, the policies and the things that you supported, you guys should have got together and you guys should have acted like, I don't know, a caucus. You could have even called yourselves something like, I don't know, the squad. And in that caucus and in that squad, having this kind of tiebreaker vote, this minority position that wags the dog. I mean, you can't get anything accomplished because the number of votes threshold is so narrow that your 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 people that make up the squad, or how many other people that there are, can basically do the exact same thing that Joe Manchin was doing in the Senate. You could do it in the House of Representatives. You guys chose not to. And now, on this one, you come to Jesus. Does Bowman realize his mistake? And the next time around when legislation comes up, is Bowman going to work in coordination to kill that legislation until there's some level of compromise to get some level of what he wants? If not, then all of this is just posturing and none of it matters. Like, share, and subscribe.